just to give people a wee idea about what was discussed today, over and above, the various candidates for Celtic's Player of the Year on the back of, or going into the tail end of a season which looks like another, complete domestic success story.
How many candidates is there though? That's the problem, because Daizen Maeda.
I think no matter that Alistair Johnson is so good at talking, I think even he realised that once he'd kind of uttered Daizen Maeda, that might be the end of the conversation.
Exactly. Obviously we've got our own awards as well. The football writers, the forums were sent out last week to kind of cast your vote. There's a couple of weeks to vote. Not that too much will change, obviously, in that time, but I'd be amazed if Maeda doesn't win it hands down.
Well, Daizen Maeda could win more individual Player of the Year trophies than actual major medals this season, which is and I think he's probably odds on to do that. Although, I tell you what, Alistair Johnson, what he did make pretty clear, even though he was, absolutely gushing in his praise of what Maeda's achieved this season, he also made a very strong case for Callum McGregor in terms of, what Celtic miss when Callum McGregor's not in that side. And perhaps, and I've made this point previously myself, that he kind of gets taken for granted, just because he's part of the furniture. But Callum McGregor, for me, is another exceptional season.
Not just that, what Callum McGregor does generally, actually being specific, the goals he scored this season, outside the box.
The momentum he gave Celtic right at the start of the season. Yeah. And I know that, obviously, Nicholas Kuhn had a great start to the season as well, but Callum McGregor, for me, just went foot down, throttle down from the very start of the season, just because he knows the importance of getting off to a good start. Scott, we've spoken about this previously, in fact, before we come in here tonight, that Rangers have become notorious for getting a real sluggish start to the season, dropping points. By the time they're going into the first derby of the season, they're already under immense pressure. Callum McGregor was the guy that, if there was any teething problems at the start of the season for Celtic,
he doesn't let it happen.
He was single-handedly taking control of the situation to make sure that points weren't being dropped. I just think the general standard of his performances, though, as a midfield player, joy to watch. And he would, if I was sitting down just now, Daizen Maeda certainly made all the headlines and the eye-catching contribution in terms of goals scored, and that's always going to be, half the battle in terms of winning a Player of the Year award. But in terms of consistency and quality, I just find it really hard to look past Callum McGregor. I think I could see why Alistair Johnson was putting him up as a potential candidate.
So would you go McGregor over?
I would take a lot. I'd take a lot of. I think you would probably, and it's for all, unfortunately, for all the sort of newspaper tabloid instincts, this is the guy that scored all the goals, and he's taken the credit and the headlines, and he's the obvious candidate.
It's the story with Maeda as well, though, with Kyogo leaving. No, that gap was there. Then there was this kind of narrative built about Celtic bringing a striker in to replace him. And there was probably a feeling about Maeda last season, the season before, as much as the work rate and all that was there, if there was anything he lacked, was maybe his finishing. The final action.
Yeah.
People didn't see him as a natural goal scorer. And for Brendan Rodgers, to put him up there ahead of Adam Ida, remember, it was brought in as obviously a natural centre forward. And for Maeda to then go and produce what he's produced, and it's the quality of the finishes as well. As I say, that the doubts that were there about his finishing,
which were justified. They were justified because it wasn't a good finish. It wasn't a natural, composed, clinical finisher.
Yeah,
that is again the benefit of working with a manager like Brendan Rodgers.
Correct.
Brendan Rodgers improves players, and Maeda is a different player entirely now from the one that Ange Postecoglou signed.
Yeah.
Because you looked at him then, you remember the old argument, you'd say, this guy could just finish if he had a final touch, if he had a bit of composure and those crucial moments, he wouldn't be at Celtic because all his other attributes are so good. But Brendan Rodgers has found a way of getting all those raw bits and pieces together and adding this clinical, composed finisher into the mix. And that's why, everybody's been kind of bending over themselves to give Maeda all the plaudits, and deservedly so. But I just thought Alistair Johnson made an interesting point when he picked out the importance of Callum McGregor and said he's obviously making it clear. He said, look, Celtic side are night and day when he's not in the team, and I think that's true, and it's a point that shouldn't be lost on anybody. Even though I do think the clamour will be, and the popular vote will go to Daizen Maeda.
In the comment section, our pal Gianni, who I don't know if we're talking to, Keith, because we've still got no pizzas, but
no sponsorship deal.
He does say you could say the same for Maeda, but he's always fit, so that's never the scenario. I think he meaning that he's just as crucial as McGregor. Mark Fairfield says Daizen should get 2, 1 for half a season as a winger, 1 for the goal scoring machine he became.
Well, he's been about 2 players every time he's walked out onto a pitch, so maybe he should get 6.
Maybe. Rebel says Maeda, the most improved player this season, deserves recognition this year. Green Machine says Callum makes the team tick, Maeda makes the opposition scared. A couple as well here. Stephen Heaney says, who else has scored 30 plus in the top league for the country other than Maeda? I'll wait. Frank Carson says no other player comes close to Maeda for player of the year.
That's a cracker.
There's a little bit of a debate though, guys, in the comment section about overall player of the year. There's a few Rangers fans chiming in. Robert Steele saying Raskin's a more obvious choice for overall player of the year, or Czerny for his display at Celtic Park.
For one game. For his display at Celtic Park. Look, I can understand why Rangers fans won't want to listen to this, because it's not great to hear, but the bottom line is the team's been destroyed once again in their own backyard over the course of a campaign. You can't make a strong, coherent case for anybody in a Rangers shirt this season, because it's been another shambolic season.
Raskin he was the one, Keith, that kept coming up. I mean, there's another one.
Raskin's been excellent,
aye.
But he's not part of a successful side, and that is something that you have to factor in. Yes, it's and he has been, and I've praised Raskin, heavily throughout the course of the season, and I've said that I thought he was, a really talented player when he first came in. I couldn't understand why he fell out the picture for a while. Raskin's a top class operator, no doubt about it. But Celtic are running off with all the prizes.
He's still been inconsistent, Raskin. I mean, he's
been as consistent as anybody in a Rangers shirt.
That's what I was going to say. In the Rangers squad, he probably has been the most consistent over the course of the campaign. But even then, this team is so inconsistent that he's almost kind of been dragged into that. And that's the thing about Callum McGregor. I mean, Callum McGregor's probably 2 or 3 games this season where he's been a bit off it like everybody, but in the main, you think of him and Maeda, they've produced almost every game.
Well, what they're doing is achieving a level of consistency and excellence.
Yeah.
And Rangers have fallen so far short of that. Yeah. Right. And that's why ultimately the argument about, the only thing that will be interesting is there's so many different candidates at Celtic. Obviously, Maeda is an obvious one. Callum McGregor's an obvious one, but Schmeichel might come into it. Yeah. Carter Vickers could come into it.
Kuhn a few weeks ago might have come in.
Kuhn was the player of the first half of the season, arguably so. But
see the thing about the Rangers players, Rangers fans no doubt will come back at that and they'll say, well, Raskin schooled McGregor in the Old Firm game at Ibrox, or where was Maeda for the game at Celtic Park or whatever. But that just sums the Rangers' whole season
they're
up.
Capable of hitting heights, but they can't do it consistently.
Callum McGregor and Daizen Maeda do it every week against all the lesser teams, score every week, 8 out of 10 every week. Callum McGregor scoring goals outside the box, he's creating goals as a number 6. He's not just a guy that sits there kind of dictating the team's tempo or whatever. So that's the whole point. Of course, in one-off games, Raskin's looked brilliant in a couple of the Old Firm games. But it's about doing it over the course of a season. And no Rangers players been capable of that. That's why they're sitting over there behind the league.